Scottie Scheffler did not walk onto the 18th green at TPC River Highlands like a man chasing history. That is the terrifying part. There was no fist pump, no wild stare, no dramatic march toward destiny, just the same quiet expression, the same controlled rhythm, the same player who had spent the entire afternoon making one of the hardest sports on earth look like a simple math problem. But everybody around him knew the truth. This was not just another green. This was the doorway to golf's magic number. The ball sat on the putting surface with one job left to do. Roll in, and Scottie Scheffler shoots 59. Miss, and the world gets one of the greatest rounds of the year that somehow still feels like unfinished business. That is how high the standard has become for him. A 60 from anyone else would be a lifetime memory. A 60 from Scottie felt like golf had watched a comet pass inches outside the atmosphere. The crowd leaned in because they understood the weight of that final stroke. Broadcasters lowered their voices, phones came out. Every person watching knew they were not just seeing a birdie attempt. They were seeing a line between greatness and immortality. One putt, one roll, one tiny break in the green that could decide whether Friday afternoon became part of PGA Tour history forever, and then it slid by. Not badly, not embarrassingly, not even far enough to make the moment feel cruel. It missed by the kind of margin that makes players stare at the ground and wonder how the universe can be so precise with heartbreak. Scheffler tapped in for 60, and somehow the number looked both impossible and painful at the exact same time. He had just destroyed TPC River Highlands, but history had escaped through a crack in the door. That is what made the moment so shocking. Scottie Scheffler had taken the lead, moved to 16 under, and put the entire Travelers Championship on notice. But the story was not just that he was winning. The story was that the best player in the world had come one shot away from something even bigger, and the scariest part was this: he made it look like he might get another chance. To understand why that final putt mattered so much, you have to understand the number. In golf, 59 is not just a score. It is a locked door that almost nobody ever opens. Players can win majors, lift trophies, make millions, and still never get close to it. A 59 is not simply great golf. It is golf entering a different atmosphere, where every swing feels scripted by something bigger than talent. And Scottie Scheffler was standing one roll away from touching it. That is what made the miss so strange. He did not collapse. He did not throw away the tournament. He did not even lose the lead. He shot 60, a score that would define the career of almost any player on earth. But because it was Scottie, the reaction felt different. People were not just saying, "What a round." They were saying, "How did that last one not fall?" That is the dangerous standard he has created. And then there was the layer that made this bigger than a scorecard. Scottie Scheffler was not some unknown player catching fire for one magical afternoon. He was the number one player in the world, the man everybody was already chasing, the man whose normal level had become abnormal for everyone else. If he had made that putt, he would not just have joined golf's rare sub-60 club, he would have done it from the throne. That's why the 18th green felt so heavy. This was not a player trying to prove he belonged. This was the best player alive nearly doing something the best players in history almost never do. There's a difference between a hot round and a historic warning shot. One disappears when the tournament ends. The other changes how the field looks at you forever. So, yes, the ball missed. The 59 never arrived. The history books did not get the number they were waiting for, but the message still landed with brutal force. Scottie Scheffler was one shot away from a place most golfers never even see, and if this was his near miss, the rest of golf had to ask the terrifying question, what happens when he stops missing? But to understand why that 60 felt so dangerous, you have to go back to the beginning of the round. Because Scottie Scheffler did not start Friday looking like a man about to flirt with 59. He made an early bogey. For most players, that is the moment the dream dies before it even starts. For Scottie, it was just the moment the machine switched on. That is the strange thing about Scheffler. Mistakes do not seem to shake him the way they shake everyone else. A bogey does not become panic. A bad swing does not become a spiral. He absorbs the damage, resets the system, and then starts solving the golf course like it has given him a personal insult. What looked like a small crack suddenly became the trigger. Then the birdies started coming. Not as a lucky wave, not as some wild run where every putt crashed into the center by accident. They came with order. Fairways found, approaches controlled, wedges landing with surgical distance, putts rolling with the kind of speed that makes a cup look twice its normal size. TPC River Highlands was soft, but Scottie made it look defenseless, and that is what separated his 60 from the other low rounds happening around him. Plenty of players were scoring. Victor Hovland went deep, Akshay Bhatia went deep, the board was covered in red numbers. But Scheffler's round felt different because it did not look like a player catching fire. It looked like the number one player in the world calmly removing every escape route from the course. By the time he reached the closing stretch, the round had stopped feeling like a score and started feeling like a warning. He had turned an early mistake into fuel, turned soft conditions into a weapon, and turned Friday at the Travelers Championship into a message for everyone chasing him. Scottie Scheffler was not begging the putter to save him. He was giving himself chance after chance until history finally had to answer. And it was not just history that had to answer. The entire leaderboard did, because when Scottie Scheffler walked off with 60, he did not simply post a low number and disappear into the clubhouse. He changed the temperature of the tournament. Suddenly, every player behind him was not chasing a score anymore. They were chasing a man who had just come inches from 59. That is what made Friday at the Travelers Championship feel so strange. The conditions were there for everyone. The course was soft, the pins were attackable, the greens were receiving shots. Victor Hovland went out and fired a 61, the kind of round that should make a player feel like he had seized control of the week. But when he looked up, Scottie was still 2 shots ahead, and that is when the problem became real. Akshay Bhatia felt it too. He went low. He built a beautiful round. He pushed his name into the fight. On most Fridays, a 62 would feel like a thunderclap across the property. But this time, it was swallowed by something louder. Scheffler had turned the scoreboard into a warning sign, and everyone else was reading it in red numbers. The psychological math had changed. Chasing a normal leader is uncomfortable. Chasing Scottie Scheffler after he nearly shoots 59 is something else entirely. Every birdie from the field suddenly feels like maintenance, not progress. Every par feels like losing ground. Every missed putt feels heavier because the player in front of you has already shown what happens when the door cracks open. And now the tournament was no longer about one round. It was about what came next. Hovland was close enough to make Scottie feel pressure. Bhatia was close enough to believe. The rest of the field was close enough to pretend they still had time. But deep down, everyone knew the same thing. If Scheffler's near-perfect round was only the beginning, Saturday was not going to be moving day. It was going to be a survival test. And that is the terrifying part about Scottie Scheffler right now. The leaderboard was shaking, the field was chasing, and the golf world had just watched a man come one putt away from 59. But somehow, the most shocking thing was not the score, it was how familiar it felt. Scottie did not make greatness look like lightning, he made it look like routine maintenance. That is the new reality the PGA Tour is living in. When most players shoot 60, the sport stops and treats it like a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. When Scottie Scheffler shoots 60, people immediately start talking about the putt that did not fall. That is not disrespect. That is the standard he has built with his own hands. He has turned excellence into expectation, and expectation into something much heavier. Because Scheffler does not dominate with chaos, he does not need theatrics. He does not need to stare down cameras, scream at the sky, or turn every birdie into a personal revolution. His danger is quieter than that. He walks, calculates, swings, resets, and slowly removes the oxygen from everyone around him. By the time the field realizes what is happening, the tournament already belongs to his rhythm. The 59 did not happen. The final putt stayed out. The magic number survived for another day. But maybe that is what should scare everyone the most, because Scottie Scheffler was imperfect and still took control. He made an early bogey and still nearly walked into history. He missed the biggest putt of the day and still left the course as the man everyone had to chase. So the question is no longer whether Scottie can produce a historic round. He just showed that he can stand on the edge of one without ever losing control of himself. The real question is what happens when the edge disappears? What happens when the last putt falls? What happens when his almost becomes complete? Scottie Scheffler was one shot away from golf history, but for the rest of the PGA Tour, he revealed something much more dangerous. His almost perfect golf still might not be his ceiling. This was the best player alive nearly doing something the best players in history almost never do. There's a difference between a hot round and a historic warning shot. One disappears when the tournament ends, the other changes how the field looks at you forever. So, yes, the ball missed. The 59 never arrived. The history books did not get the number they were waiting for, but the message still landed with brutal force. Scottie Scheffler was one shot away from a place most golfers never even see, and if this was his near miss, the rest of golf had to ask the terrifying question, what happens when he stops missing? But to understand why that 60 felt so dangerous, you have to go back to the beginning of the round. Because Scottie Scheffler did not start Friday looking like a man about to flirt with 59. He made an early bogey. For most players, that is the moment the dream dies before it even starts. For Scottie, it was just the moment the machine switched on. That is the strange thing about Scheffler. Mistakes do not seem to shake him the way they shake everyone else. A bogey does not become panic. A bad swing does not become a spiral. He absorbs the damage, resets the system, and then starts solving the golf course like it has given him a personal insult. What looked like a small crack suddenly became the trigger. Then the birdies started coming. Not as a lucky wave, not as some wild run where every putt crashed into the center by accident. They came with order. Fairways found, approaches controlled. Wedges landing with surgical distance. Putts rolling with the kind of speed that makes a cup look twice its normal size. TPC River Highlands was soft, but Scottie made it look defenseless.